So this is another overview of some of the new additions to the VCV library. We start with Rhodonea from Axioma, another interesting module from Axioma. This is an oscillator that you can change. I think Rhodonea is also called Rose. I'm not so sure. There was something on Google. And as you can see, we can get really interesting wave shapes and all sorts of different sonic results here, which is quite interesting. Everything CV is CV controlled. So of course, like as always, I have here a small example. I'm using the Tesseract also from Axioma to generate, in this case, pitch information. So I'm mixing a few outputs with the VCV mixer, attenuating them. And then I'm using sample and hold to sample them. And this is, of course, going through a quantizer. And I have here Rhodonea being modulated with oct, as you can see here. So there's lots of movement. Sort of a percussive voice. And it sounds a bit like it has a built-in low-pass filter because it will remove some of the harmonics when it outputs a sine wave, of course. I also have here micromap, which is mapped to the reverb of this voice, as you can see, like this. So every once in a while, I can do this better, like this. Yeah, every once in a while. It will raise the reverb amount, the send reverb, just like now. Another voice I have here, I don't know why I called it bird, but I called it bird. And of course it's another Rhodonea. I'm using another sample and hold to sequence it. So I'm again sampling this signal from Tesseract. And I also use Tesseract to modulate, as you can see here, the waveform. And this was this, it's not even a bird sound, I don't know why I call it a bird. But it is a sort of a texture. Let's wait for it one more time. It's being triggered by a divided clock. Just like this. Of course, going through some delay. The next voice I have here is another percussive voice. I'm using Eugene to sequence this voice. It's nice and percussive, sort of metallic. I can change also the sound here. Very nice. Another voice is a bass. Sort of metallic type bass. I'm using the grid sequencer to sequence it. And I also have random voltage modulating the shape here. And the last voice is a kick drum. You can also have kick drums with it. So what I'm doing, I have one envelope for the amplitude and another envelope for the pitch. So we get a kick drum. The next module is 5 Splice from Dent. It's a sequential switch with slew, which means that you can scan through different signals. Here, for example, I have a few oscillators. I have here a sine wave, a triangle wave, sawtooth, and 2 pulse waves, or 1 square and 1 pulse. And here I can switch between them. So I have here the trigger. You can see this here on the scope, on the left scope. Now we have the triangle, the saw, square, and pulse. And you can see here on the scope on the right, we have another output which will output the on which step we are. So on step 1 we have 0 volts, then we have, I believe it's 2 volts, and then another 2, and like this up to 10 volts. So this you can also use, and it has a few different running modes. So you can go down, you can go, it's twice down, so it will skip one step, so it will go from 1 to 3 or from A to C. And then we have reverse and twice reverse. Then we have ping pong, and we have also random, which is also interesting. And again, we have the slew. So if I add slew, you can see here on the left how it will morph to the next shape, which is quite interesting. So again, I have a small example here. We start with a sequence. I will unmute it. I have here the grid sequencer, and it's sequencing an FM operator, Basel, Bleak, and the TSL, and they are going to the 5 inputs of the 5 splice. It's running randomly with nice slew also, so it's morphing between those waveforms, going through some delay. So we get nice movement. Then I have here wave splicing. This is also really interesting with this module. Basically what you do is you take a few different wave shapes. I have here the sub out from TSL, triangle, and Basel also, and I'm scanning through them at audio rates, and you can see here the interesting result we get. And I can change the frequency. Just tune them a bit. What I'm also doing here, I'm using again this step output. I'm sending it through a clock divider to get a sub oscillator. Again, this is happening everything at audio rates. And then I'm splitting, this is going through tangents, and I'm sending the high frequencies like I do always to a delay. So let's unmute this, and then I can do something like this. So again, the 5 splice is really interesting also for wave splicing. Then we have Terraform. What I'm doing here, I have 3 sequences from the Sec3, and I'm sending them to the 5 splice. And I also have 2 sample and holds, so random voltages going there. But as you could hear, one is being triggered with a faster clock, so we get those ratchets every now and then, because again this is running randomly. Which is again quite cool. So it's also really interesting to switch between different sequences. And I also have here saws from Squinky Labs. And what I'm doing here, I want to have the 5 steps active on the 5 splice. I have here 2 of them, but I want some of the steps to be empty. So I'm using a mult. I'm just using a dummy cable. So I'm using a mult, and I'm sending just empty cables. So they are sending no signals to a few inputs. If I solo this, you can hear it. And then sometimes it will play, sometimes not. Again, it has built-in slew, so there are no clicks, which is quite interesting. And I'm using 2, which means that one is going to the left channel, one to the right channel. You can hear this panning effect. Let's do this. And another thing I'm doing here, I'm mixing the step outputs from those 5 splices, and I'm using them as pitch information for the FM operator. So again, lots of things you can do with the 5 splice, really interesting sequential switch. The next module is the SFZ Player from Squinky Labs. You can load SFZ instruments inside of VCV Rack, which is quite cool. SFZ is sort of like Contact, so you can create your own instruments. Not with this module, but there's lots of information online how you can create your own SFZ instruments, and then you can load them with the player. It's polyphonic, of course. There is velocity, gate, volt per octave, but also FM, which is quite cool. And again, there are lots of instruments available online. I downloaded one, sort of a piano. So I have here marbles sequencing this piano polyphonically. Let's wait for it. Let's make this a bit quicker. And I have also velocity. So you can have a piano or load lots of different instruments, drums and the violins, strings, whatever, using this SFZ player. And also, of course, create your own instruments and load them in VCV. I'm also sending this piano into Simpliciter. So to randomly record this piano and play it back in reverse and an octave lower. And again, there is also FM. So I have here the same piano loaded, and I'm FMing it with kitchen sync. If I solo this, you can hear the effect it has. Sounds a bit weird, but you can FM the SFZ instruments, which is quite cool. The next module is Oppressor from Flag, another interesting, simple, and very effective module in this collection. Basically, it's a multi-band sidechain compressor that you can use and add movement in all sorts of unpredictable places in your patch. So you have the key input, which is the signal you want to use to sidechain something, and it will follow, as you can see, it will follow the frequency bands of this signal. So according to the signal itself, it will compress or oppress the signal you want to sidechain. So let's have a look at an example I have here. First of all a few drums. So I have the gate sequencer sequencing a kick drum deep from Hora and the hi-hats from Hora. And I have here also a snare, and I'm using the Shape Master Pro to bring it in. And by the way, this is also a new module, but I have a video, the Shape Master Pro is also a new module. I have a video all about it, so if you are interested, go have a look. Now I have here a voice, I have here Blick going through tangents, and I have a small sequence sequencing this voice, and this is going to the input of Oppressor, and I'm using the drums, I'm mixing the drums and I'm using them to sidechain this voice. So let's have a listen. If I solo it, you can see, you will hear. That it will move with the drums. Of course, also here I'm sending the high frequencies through a delay, so I can do this. Maybe it needs a bit more volume. So it adds movement to this voice just by sidechaining it to the drums. I have here another voice. This is a noise. So I'm sending noise into oppressor and I'm using the kick, only the kick, not the whole drums, to sidechain it. And you can see that it will sidechain, in this case, only certain frequencies, because again this is multi-band compression or sidechain compression. So there is still movement, but not on all of the voice, which is quite cool. The next voice I have here, I'm sending the kick into a reverb plateau. And again, I'm sidechaining it only with the kick. It adds another layer. If I do something like this with the kick, you can hear reverb. And the last voice here I have is a sequence. So I have the modulo sequencer. I'm sending it to a sequential switch, and it's also going twice through stack from Borg Audio, because I take it an octave up and 2 octaves up. So randomly this voice will be an octave up or 2 octaves up thanks to the sequential switch. And now here I'm doing this. If I zoom in a bit, maybe we can see it better. I'm sending it again to oppressor and I'm using the snare. So you can hear and you can see it also here. So whenever the snare is coming in, this voice is going down. And I'm also sending it into an envelope follower, and you can see the result here, which is opening the filter. So not only the level goes down, but it also closes the filter, so also the frequencies are going down, or the high frequencies are being ducked. And I'm using this envelope to open the filter, so whenever the voice comes in, also the filter opens. So really lots of things you can do with this module. It's really easy just to add movement to everything, or if you want to sidechain something, it's really easy to use and quite effective. The last module for today is Filling Station from Frozen Wasteland. It allows us to dial in and create patterns and grooves in unique ways. Basically, we have 4 rows, but we have 16 outputs, and each step can be or can send out a trigger from either output. So I can set, for example, step 1. I just click and drag step 1 to output trigger from output 1. And then 4, and then 2, and then so on. I can create up to 16 steps and 16 outputs. Now you have 4 rows, they can run independently. So for example, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. This will be a 7-step sequence. I can have here a 2-step sequence, and then I can have here 4 steps and so on. So if you set it to independent, there is also end of cycle inputs, clock inputs for each of the rows separately, and you have also scenes you can shift, you can flip. Really interesting, super unique and interesting way to create rhythms and feels. So here I have another example. I have here one filling station. You can see I'm using 1 to 9. outputs, but I also have output 16 set just because I wanted rests. Maybe it's a good idea to add, to add something like 0 or something like this, just so it's possible to add rests and to have different length of sequences. But it's not so bad because we have 16 outputs. I didn't use all 16. So the first trigger 1, output 1, is triggering a bass drum. You can see this here, 1 1 1 1 1. Then we have sort of hi-hats with output 2. And then we have the FM operator, so I'm using output 3 and 4 to trigger 2 FM operators. And this is all coming from the first sequence, but there is also output 4 here on the second sequence, which is shorter. Then there is the percussive vibration. And this is output 5. So this is already row 2. Another thing I wish that was possible here, so I'm using the same clock for all rows, but I had to connect the clock to all of them. Maybe having it normaled, so the first input will be normaled to the other 3, for example. I don't know, again, it's not such a bad thing in VCV because we can just use more cables. Another voice is another hi-hat. So I'm using 6 and 7, you can see this here, 6 and 7. Then a rim shot. And then we have blick. And this is output 9. See this here, and again 16 I'm using sort of blanks, rests, and this is triggering sample and hold, which is sequencing blick. And again I'm sending the high frequencies, of course, like always, through a delay. So let's unmute this also. So again, really interesting rhythms. You can create all sorts of feels and patterns and grooves. Oh, it also has scenes, of course, so you can save different scenes if you wish and sequence this. Really interesting, simple but yet very powerful module from Frozen Wasteland. Okay, very interesting, and that was it for today. Those are the 5 modules for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.